Good afternoon, distinguished guests. Welcome to our Talking Across Generations on Education event under the theme of Connecting Youth, a Roadmap for Peace, which Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development organized in partnership with Kerala Institute of Local Administration and gathered representatives of internationally recognized cities of peace as panelists in order to maximize the inclusivity and diversity of today's dialogue. MGIEP is first research institute of UNESCO in the Asia Pacific region and focuses on SDG 4.7, which is peaceful and sustainable societies. Our vision is to build kinder brains and transform education for humanity. Through our science and evidence-based programs, we mainstream social and emotional learning, innovative digital pedagogies, and put youth at the center of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To achieve the latter, MGIP has created Talking Across Generations on Education, a unique advocacy tool for youth that amplifies their voices and creates a safe platform for a dialogue where youth share their recommendations, concerns, fears, as well as critical opinions with decision makers and the entire world in unrestricted, non-hierarchical, and transparent manner. Likewise, this platform enables decision makers to exchange their thoughts, ideas, expertise on the subject matter directly with youth. It also allows decision makers to hear and understand better youth concerns and encourages them to implement the innovative recommendations provided by youth in the future policies. My name is Nasreddinova Fazola. I am a project officer at UNESCO MGIP and I lead youth-driven communities of peace program of our institute. Today, I am honored and humbled to invite Mr. Joy Elamon for inauguration speech. He is the Director General of Kerala Institute of Local Administration. Please, Mr. Elamon, the floor is yours.
Good evening, friends. So now we are into this connecting youth, and added to that is a roadmap for peace. Probably this is the right time to start thinking about this, especially the world is actually looking for peace, building peace, and there the role of youth becomes important. But then that is of the present as well as for the future. We are also in the path towards sustainable development goals. I think most of you are connected or have understood, have thought about it, and our Agenda 2030. Hope you remember that. And we are actually almost 7 years near to that or far to that. 2030 is just 7 years. And we have to go back to the history to see how we have evolved this concept of Agenda 30. We had the Rio, I think it is in 1992, I think it's 1992. But then several other conferences have happened. But what we remember is about Health for All by 2000 in the 1980s. We start thinking about that because all these global initiatives with setting agenda, I think it started in the 80s itself. But then when it comes to Rio, it brought together various concepts, various sectors, considering that these are all interrelated. And several years have passed after that, and then we had the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. It was one of the major steps the global leaders had taken. We had 8 goals. Some of you might still remember that. And then towards the end of that, we also noticed that we have not reached anywhere near to that Millennium Development Goals. Probably we need to think and act differently. And that is how the global leaders started having discussions, consultations with all kinds of stakeholder groups. Whereas the MDG, one of the limitations of the MDG was also identified as that it was not really, it did not have the real consultations before starting it. So for the SDGs, when it came to Sustainable Development Goals, at least a 3 years of large-scale consultations, discussions across the globe, beyond the governments also. That was a major difference. So it actually had the various civil society organizations, the political organizations, all of the kinds of stakeholder groups were also part of or participants to those consultations. And there it emerged that nothing can be achieved with a sectoral approach. The health cannot be approached simply as health. Education cannot be approached simply as education. So slowly, the goals, number of goals became more. And we finally ended up with this, how many goals? 17 goals. But then goals also do not actually lead to action. We need to specify, and that's how we had the indicators. Indicators within the goals, and then with those indicators, targets were also set. But one thing we need to remember is that the difference between the MDGs and the SDGs is that we have everything covered. Leave no one behind is the motto. That is the key. Leave no one behind. Earlier it was only percentage, this much percentage below poverty line, above poverty, and all those percentages and other things. But for SDGs, it is leave no one behind. I don't want to talk much about the SDGs at the moment. I know that she would be waiting, Sola would be waiting for me to step down to start the real function. But then we need to also know that youth is going to be the key to achieving SDGs for the 2030 agenda. And how can they involve? See, please remember when we had these discussions and consultations on SDGs before 2016, various youth organizations were also part of it. But then when you have actions, we need to also see that youth are also part of it. And that is how we have this Connecting Youth Roadmap for Peace comes in. But then for us in Kerala, most of our achievements are based on social action, historically, social action. Whether it is the land reforms, whether it is the literacy movement, whether it is the participatory resource mapping exercise, whether it is the People's Plan campaign, it's all about social action. And where youth becomes the key. But then we also had this doubt. Earlier days when we were young, me and all others, Anthony and all, we were young. Oh, that was the time when all the youth came together to do all these things. Now youth does not have this kind of passion for all these things. We have proved otherwise. In the 2018 floods, or in the case of COVID, who did it? For example, the people who are here in Trivandrum, the entire youngster group, they actually led the movement during the times of floods, the disasters, the COVID and all. And then we as little older generation group, we also understood that no, youth are ready to do, only thing is that we are not going to give space to you. Actually, many a time the problem is that we do not, though we got all the space, we do not give space, and that is how it happens. But that is why when the corporation of Thiruvananthapuram is looking towards making it a city of peace, I think that is the ideal place to start thinking about connecting youth, especially because this was the corporation of the city where the youth actually poured in like anything to do all these kinds of activities, the social action. So this would be the ideal place, and this conference, today's conference, actually would lead to one step further to making Thiruvananthapuram the city of peace. That's how we look forward to it. And we have with us the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education and Peace for Sustainable Development. They have actually came forward to host this event, do this event. Thank you for that, especially. And from the KILA side, and also from the government of Kerala side, you also should understand that we are also into this process of looking towards urbanization, which is going to be, Kerala would become one of the fastest urbanizing areas in the world, and so we are looking towards developing our cities to cope up with all these changes, and where again the youth becomes important. And from KILA's side, the Kerala Institute of Local Administration side, we are actually honored with your presence, as well as we are also happy to collaborate with the UNESCO and the MGIP so that we can actually work towards this. KILA on our part have also been working towards these aspects, especially we have been supporting all the 6 cities in the state. One has already become the Thrissur has become the city of learning city. Kozhikode has recently been claimed as this city of literature. We are looking towards folk arts in Kannur, city of folk arts and culture in Kannur. Then in Kochi is still trying to be the city of design. Kollam is trying to be the city of biodiversity, and Thiruvananthapuram becoming the city of peace. And peace has a larger dimension which they will explain, but then from our side, from KILA's side, we are also happy to be part of all these initiatives. We have been trying to support all these cities and corporations to move towards that. Not only just getting the name or the tag of city of literature, learning city and other things, but moving from there to really reach that height, we are also supporting, and we are happy that this becomes one of the first steps in making Thiruvananthapuram the city of peace. Thank you for hosting it, the UNESCO MGIP side, as well as all of you have gathered here, this group of youngsters. You would remember that we had recently held the conference on climate change under the leadership of the youth. So this also will be, for us also, it will be a learning exercise as well as one step further in our own exercise. Thank you for being with us. Naturally, usually what happens is that after all this talk, sometimes I forget to say that this meeting is inaugurated. So I don't want to forget that. Officially, I declare this Connecting Youth, a Roadmap for Peace open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elamon. Now it's time for us to connect our youth, our international youth. And I would invite one by one our panelists. Dana Elise from Detroit, the United States. Mr. Hiroshima, Mr. Hideaki Shinoida from Hiroshima, Japan. Sorry. Ms. Navina Mutabazi from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Ms. Irene Anthony from Thiruvananthapuram, India. Ms. Sherry Guy Dangango from Detroit, the United States. Mr. Emilet Alan David from Kampala, Uganda. Ms. Andre Christofields from Nicosia, Cyprus. And Mr. Jiju Alex from India. Thank you all for coming here and joining us today. Over to you. Thank you.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also honored to be the moderator of this TAGe event organized by UNESCO MGIEP here in Thiruvananthapuram in India. I'd like to start with the preamble to the Constitution of the UNESCO. Since wars begin in the minds of man, it is in the minds of man that the defenses of peace must be constructed. It was in 1945. Yes, it all starts in the minds of men, women, either they are old or young. And the youth have a major role to play in building peace. And this is the topic of this TAGe edition. I'd like to share with you some figures. Today, there are 1.8 billion youth in the world. Almost 90% of them are living in developing countries. 60% of them are actively engaged or plan to support the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and less than 20% of peace-related initiatives were youth-led in Asia-Pacific region, where YPS is implemented, and these are the figures of the UNDP. So even if the youth have a major role to play in building peace, when it comes to decision-making process, they are often isolated and sometimes marginalized. Still, their voice needs to be heard and taken into account. So, they are coming from different continents: Africa, Asia, America, and Europe. And we are very happy to have all of them with us today. So welcome, and please feel free to have an open dialogue. This is a unique occasion to do that. So before starting, I just want to share with you the session design. We will focus on three important questions. The first one is the link between the youth and the 2030 agenda, and also why it is essential for the youth to participate in building peace regarding the SDGs and YPS agenda. Then we will discuss the opportunities and challenges for the youth, and finally, how decision makers can help them to address the SDGs and YPS, and which new and or existing institutions could support their effort. After the dialogue, we'll open a Q&A session with the audience, so please feel free to ask your questions. And before that, I will invite you, please, if you can connect on this website, mentimeter.com, because we need you to answer to one question, which is, what is your current emotion now? How are you feeling at this moment? So please, if you can enter this code, so it's 35012964, and tell us how do you feel. So now we will start with the first part of our debate. So we will discuss the link between the youth and the 2030 agenda, and why it is essential for the youth to participate to building peace, to address the SDGs and YPS agenda. So I'd like to start with you, Andre. You are from Nicosia, and you work for an organization located in the Yunnan buffer zone, and an organization that tries to connect two separate communities between the north and the south of Nicosia. So you have a lot to say about conflict and peace building efforts. So please, can you tell us, like, what do you think about this first question? What is the link between the youth and the 2030 agenda?
Yeah, they told me that. Hi, can you hear me? Yes, great. Thank you. So I think it's important when we're discussing peace to understand that, or at least to consider that peace is not just one thing. It's not something that we can achieve and be done with it. It's a process. It's a slow process. And it requires care, and it requires a lot of effort. And I think what the youth can bring into the discussion is the experience on the ground. There is a lot of work being done by young people all around the world in many different places, whether it's engaging through the human experience or the non-human, I mean, protection of habitats and of the environment. So I think becoming aware of the different ways in which peace can be interpreted, can be anticipated, what priorities there might be in different places. I think that would be a very useful link between the agenda and the SDGs. And I think one of the important ways and key ways of the SDGs being really sustainable, because they are anyway sustainable development goals, I think sustainability would come from the engagement with the people who are required to implement and kind of act upon those. So just a very general introduction.
Yes, interesting. And pointed the link between sustainability and peace, and the fact that the youth play a role in this link, and also the fact that we have to take into account that the youth live different situations. So it's not the same for all of them, and we have to take this into account. So thank you very much. Then I will turn to you, Eric. You are an activist, a writer, and also a researcher. And you have a field experience in Africa, in Uganda, and you are working on peaceful methods for youth. Can you tell us about this, and if you can link it to the 2030 agenda, and also the importance of for the youth to participate to building peace?
Yeah, so in my experience, it's the youth that has this creative brilliance inside them in the process of formation, the moment during the education, meeting other persons, the ideas for a better future. I found them to be the most sharp, especially at the youth. So I think the solutions, especially to a world that's not yet perfect, the solutions are with the youth. They actually already have the ideas, and during connecting those youth, bring them together, we actually get new insights how we can transform the current world into a more ideal world.
Okay, so you point to the fact that they are the more creatives, and also they can bring innovative ideas and solutions to, when it comes to resolving conflicts.
Yeah, and maybe in addition, so the older generation, they've maybe tried, but so far not yet completely succeeded. So they might have become a bit more pessimistic, a bit more negative. And the youth, they're full of hope. They still believe they can do it better than the last generation. And that hope, I think, in behind, there's still hope.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. I'll turn to Dana from Detroit. So what can you tell us, please, Dana, from your own point of view?
Yes, I think that this is such a important topic, especially if we thinking about the agenda of 2030, and we have about 7 more years, right? And so thinking about where I was 7 years ago, and the things that I wanted and dreamed for myself, and the seeds that could be planted in the youth currently, I think we need to be very careful about just putting the youth over social media. Like, oh, we need the youth to just do social media. We need them to participate in that way, because I think another aspect that we're talking about is ensuring that we have emotional resilience. And so social media and adding social media kind of builds up another layer of emotions that comes into that space. Like, so we deal with emotions, we deal with the addiction of social media, we deal with those things as we're interacting with it. And so we have to make sure that the creativity is expanding beyond what adults or what policymakers or people behind closed doors are saying where we fit in, because they mostly are saying, oh, we don't really know how to get on that app and post these things, but they do, so maybe they can help with that. And it's like, no, we need to make sure we are standing on what we say, and as far as emotional resilience, providing resources and skills, so while they're adding to social media, they can also take care of themselves, and they can also push through, and then we can create new avenues, and with technology, with activity, photography. I think we go by in Detroit without us, and so we need to make sure that when we're in our future, we not just written on a paper and then signed to us, and then we come back and find out, and then we're knocking on the doors and lobbying. We are already on the drawing board. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. Just to like build back from what Dana was speaking about how the digital landscape is together overally, especially the internet or social media platforms. I would say that at this time, it's the crucial time that youth can harness the opportunities that are brought by the internet, and the fact that young people are already adaptive to both internet and even emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and augmented reality. Now it's so easy or more better for youth to relate to the component of interconnectedness under the YPS agenda. Like, it's an ample time right now, although there are still challenges of the internet itself being fragmented. The internet by design is fragmented in a way that it's not language friendly, it's not inclusive of vulnerable groups. So as much as young people already have a role to contribute to that, there's still underlying challenges that are hindering the achievement of the 2030 YPS agenda. So for me, my standpoint of view would be that we are in the 50-50. What we are doing right now, a forum like this is necessary to ensure that all these fragmentations of the internet that could hinder the achievement of the agenda can be solved as early as possible, like right now, not ever, or years to come.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadina. I will turn to Emlak. coming from Uganda, so he can give us this African perspective and also the fact that intra-African trade can play a role in building peace in the continent.
Thank you. Namaskaram Vanandram, isn't it? Yes. Yes, looking at the whole peace agenda, it's very interesting. Number one, and this is linking it to the SDGs. The SDGs, and I love the speech by our guest from the government side. The SDGs ideally were meant for the young people. Everything around the sustainable development goals are the young people, and we are the majority. So from the start, anything that every government institution or every institution is developing is meant for the young people because we are the majority. It cannot be for the young people. It cannot be for the population if it's not for the young people because ideally we are the majority. That is number one. And secondly, why it's actually very important for the young people to participate, why it is essential, is because my colleagues have already said that, you know, our young people are very dynamic. Our young people are very creative in the process. And all we need as policymakers or as people, especially our Kerala government or Thenandrab community, all we need to ensure to do is to see that our young people participate in the formulation of the YPS agendas from every region. When we make them the core facilitators, the core framers of these agendas, peace is fostered. Why? Because they will put in their knowledge. They will put in they understand. They're the ones who are affected mostly by the policies and by everything that that we create as policymakers. So the bigger population of the youth make them ideally the beneficiaries. That is one. And secondly, their creativity, their energy. You see, even in this room alone, the energy of our young people, I think 80%, 90% are below the age of, I believe, 30. I am seeing very young faces in the room. So that alone shows you that they are the ones who are interested in the peace discussions. They are the ones who are interested in the peace and security discussions. So having them participate, having them taken care of, having them on the decision-making table is the first step of ensuring we foster peace and security in not only Venandram, but India, and eventually, of course, Asia Pacific, and of course, where I come from, Africa. Then lastly, she talked about peace and the intra-African trade. Of course, Africa, right now I champion youth in trade, business, money. I am the one who is pushing that in the African continent. But what we have learned ideally, and why TAGe is very important, why we are here today, is to see me now, how we can be able to link trade. Our Kerala people are trading. This afternoon, we were at the market. We saw they are selling every small thing they can sell. So the idea now is, how can we ensure the youth who are engaging with different other people, how can they become peace drivers? And that's why trade is important, because they understand the language of money. Even without anything, they'll be like, how much? 10 rupees, 5 rupees, you can buy. But how can we translate that language of money in trade into language of peace? And that is the goal. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much. So now I turn to Irene. You are an architect and also a research fellow. So you work on many sustainable projects.
Yes.
So can you please make the link between our question and your field of work?
Sure. Yeah. I am an architect and an aspiring urban practitioner. The Agenda 2030 that we are talking about already acknowledges youth as, not just mere beneficiaries, but as indispensable agents of change. The agenda has already established it, and now it's for, I feel, it's for the city governments to, translate it actually. So I can, personally, from my personal experience, I can say that when projects involve youth, it has a greater chance of sustaining itself into the future. So I have personally been part of a project that involved youth in the city of Calicut.
So Calicut is a newly designated city, UNESCO Creative City of Literature. So I have had the honor of being part of the project, and the best decision I can say that the corporation took was to actively involve youth right from the conceptual stage of the project, stage of conception, and and also take it forward to implementing it through youth. So I'm very happy that our city governments are taking that seriously, and you bringing youth to have tangible transformations done through them. So.
Okay, so thank you to all the youth. And now we will go to the decision makers. We'll start with you, Mr. Shinoda. If you can tell us, if you can react to what our youth told us.
Thank you very much. The first question you raised reminds me of the very famous words of Albert Einstein. I said that elsewhere too, but he said that we cannot solve the problems with the same level of thinking that created them. SDGs, Agenda 2030s, are about the problems of our older generations, previous generations. We take responsibility to solve these issues, but there may be some limits in terms of our capacity to solve these issues. We desperately need creative thinking that go beyond the problems with the level of Agenda 2030. So I'm so much assured today of the creativities and new ideas, prospects of cultivating new areas expressed by our young colleagues. And this is what we desperately need in terms of the link between Agenda 2030 and the youth. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shinoda. Now to my neighbor. So Cherry Gary Danyogo. So please, if you can tell us what do you think about what the youth told us?
So thank you. I think this is a phenomenal conversation, connecting youth, a roadmap for peace. And I just have to say to the representative from the government here, Kerala, thank you for the warm speech and welcoming us here. I think we're in the absolute right place. When you think about the work that Gandhi did, uniting over 200 million people towards peace, the roadmap is there. And the energy of the young people that we have here, just seeing the various paths that they took to come to this work, their levels of commitment, but there's an innate gift and talent that is placed in young people. I'm a former science teacher, and I taught 6th through 8th grade. But our young people, as early as kindergarten, if you ask them, oftentimes, they'll say, I want to be a firefighter. If you ask them what they want to be, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a police. I want to be a teacher. Because there's something that's innate in their being that says we want to help champion what is right, what is fair, what is equitable. Far too often, our educational systems put them through a number of rote exercises that somehow snuffs out that very youthful belief in hope, in doing things right, and getting things right. I feel like our young people are not encumbered by greed that you see taking place in some countries that creates this division when you think about sustainable development goals. They're the very basic human right of all people to have fairness, to have access to clean drinking water, to have access to health care, to have access to quality education. So why is it so challenging? Why are we 15 years out from the original 2030 goals, or even more, 23 years, I should say, and we have only 7 years left? But having each of these young people here, hearing them talk about their passion and their desires, I know that they have the courageous determination to do what is next, to take these conversations globally in our respective countries and help ignite a fire for change and a myriad of other young people that won't be held back. I'll say this in closing. Any movement that has taken place, if we think about the civil rights movement, it was young people. If we think about the changes in apartheid, it was young people. And if you think about what's happening in Gaza today, it's young people. And so as a 56-year-old activist up here, I'm proud to be flanked by young people on both sides of me that will help thrust us into change and to help us meet our goals by 2030. Thank you.
So now our last decision maker from the city, so Professor Jiju P. Alex, you have a large experience as a teacher and also in politics. Can you tell us what do you think about all what you've heard from our youth today?
Thank you. In fact, I was keenly listening to the responses by the students, youngsters. What has come to my mind first is that we should have a deeper understanding of the context that have led to the declaration of the Sustainable Development Goals. Why there had been an issue of addressing the problem of sustainability. And we have set up 17 goals which have to be observed by the entire world for that matter. All the signatories will have to do something about this. We should have a deeper understanding of the socio-economic disparity that has been existing in different countries. And also, we should know the means by which we would be able to resolve these issues. In fact, youth, first of all, should have better understanding of the causes of disparity and inequality, including gender issues which are prevailing in different parts of the world. And I would not say you just can measure all these things with a single yardstick. You have to have different yardsticks. Issues differ, even though we have got a universal appeal of all these 17 goals, they are all absolutely contextual. So how better we have understood the processes, the transformation which has been happening across ages, what has led us to this kind of a resolution to solve the problems of the globe with the intervention of all parties concerned and the intervention of all the countries involved. I think the youth should be given much more directions as to how to deal with these issues. You have to have a methodological understanding of what has to happen. You should also have theoretical understanding of the issues of disparity that has existed. Say that is relatable to any, I would say, any one of these 17 goals. They are all interlinked. They all can be resolved maybe without, I mean, with a single intervention. We will have to have comprehensive intervention to deal with all those issues. They are all interrelated. So how do we have comprehensively understood the whole process and action regarding sustainable development goals is something which has to be discussed by youth. Hailing from a country which has the greatest or the biggest demographic dividend, India is going to be suppliers of youth, skilled youth for the entire world in coming maybe 1 or 2 decades, because we have got the highest population and we are going to have the highest population of youngsters, which is maybe chronologically, would you say by age, the people between, 20 and 15 and 55, which is considered to be youth. We are the greatest population in the entire globe. So one issue which is of concern to me is how youth have been oriented towards maintaining the harmony of the society, particularly when we have got communal distress, divisive forces coming onto the society and trying to instigate maybe disparities and discrimination. Youth has got a greater role to play, particularly in a country like India, where there are signs of divisiveness, signs of disruptiveness by forces from outside and within. We have to have a harmony which has to be fostered by the youth. This is my first response to I think we have to we should not be superficially addressing this issue. We have to go much deeper into the causes from context to context and address the issues that way. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, all of you. So we all agree that youth have a major role to play when it comes to building peace. They are the most creative ones, innovative, energetic, and we need them for the SDGs and YPS agenda. So it was our first part of the debate. Now let's move to the second part, when we will discuss opportunities and challenges for the youth regarding to the addressing of the SDGs and YPS agenda. So please, I'll ask each of you to give me, like in one answer, on one side the challenges and in the other the opportunities. In 2 minutes, if possible. So please, we'll start with you again, Andre.
Hello, yeah, thank you. So I think one of the challenges I can identify, maybe reflecting on my experience from Cyprus, is that young people often have to operate and have to respond to a divisive context. I think we often have to operate having inherited very specific narratives, very specific, often monolithic, very often also divisive narratives. And I think one of the challenges is being able to overcome that and being able to introduce different sort of narratives, different stories, multi-perspectivity into the discussion. I think that might be one of the biggest challenges I can see, at least the youth is experiencing in Cyprus. Now, in regards to opportunities, I think it's important for us to understand that we can't be agents of change, if I may call it as such, if it doesn't sound very cliche. I think what's important is to know that there is a capacity to have some influence and have some impact. So I think focusing on the ways in which that can be done, maybe through having this type of platforms in a more consistent way, in a more constructive way, and sustained, I think that would be very, very important. And I think the way that can be translated into the local setting can also embellish the discussion and the dialogue. And when we are able to have this intercultural dialogue, that's when I think the human experience also becomes connected. And then we're able to have a more kind of holistic understanding of where it is we want to go and where it is we want to focus on.
Okay, thank you. So youth can be agents of change. This is what you are telling us. Eric, what about you, about the challenges and opportunities for these youth?
Yeah, so already inherently from the youth is what we have already seen, the creative brilliance. And now what I think we are more united than ever before. We're more connected, also because of social media. Because of social media, we are more informative. We know what's happening in the global village. And because of this, we have a shared vision. It's very easy for us to see that new world, where we want to go. But the challenges, one, we still lack the power. The power rests with the elderly generation. We lack the resources, the funds. They are being utilized or invested in war, in oppression, in other aspects, not yet going to the youth. And the youth are still disorganized. So because of this disorganization, we are not yet able to form a single voice and to take that power to actually change the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. So you told us about the fact that youth are more and more connected. So I turn to you, as you can tell us more about the digital landscape.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So from my end, I think the opportunities are, one, youth are adaptive and can leverage digital platforms or social media. I'm quite sure if we had time and asked the young faces that I see here, how many of us are on social medias, perhaps 80% of us are there. So that's already an opportunity in a way that the fact that we are now connected with the internet, it's easy to use platforms like virtual conferences, our webinars, and we now have artificial intelligence and other so many forms of emerging technologies that can help us build various peace-building initiatives. But there's also a new group of young people who are good online content creators. They can easily amplify against various violences or wars that's happening on ground in their respective countries. Like now the internet is a tool that connects us all. There's over 3 billion users of the internet, and 70% of these users are young people. So already that's an opportunity for us. But the second thing, I think the digital landscape provides an opportunity for cross-border collaborations. A good example is through this TAGe. We have my fellow young people from various countries. That's already cross-border collaborations. After here, I believe we can easily communicate via social media platforms or internet platforms to continue the work that we're doing of peace and security. So that's already an opportunity. Okay, in terms of the challenges, for me, the biggest challenge is we as young people, especially the ones doing activism, we are silenced. There is digital, there's digital, how do I say, like, there's digital threats that are happening, especially to young people who are peace builders. From my personal experience, about 2 months ago, the government banned down the use of VPNs, virtual private networks. So that already was a threat, especially for some of us who are doing sensitive work. I went out there on social media platforms and made a post to ask them to rethink on that decision. And what I received is calls from my friends and family members that you are going too far with the use of your internet. But in actual sense, what I was trying to do is say that we need VPNs for us to continue doing the work. So I think the challenge with peace building right now is that we are easily silenced. There's a lot of threats happening. There's also threats on online violence. There's cyberbullying. There's issues related to misinformation and disinformation. So as much as the internet is providing space for us to do the work, it's also the challenge is now issues of security and threats that are happening. So I think since we have decision makers here in the room, I would say that they need to help us to take this into policy and regulations frameworks that can protect us, especially young peace builders on the internet. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Dana, if you can tell us about what you think about the digital landscape, as you are very interested also of connecting youth.
Yes, I think that that's so powerful in what you're speaking on. I think also when it comes to security, especially talking about youth activists, in my experience I did a speech against the nomination of Betsy DeVos, who was the former Secretary of Education in the United States of America. And following that experience, it was on my to-do chore list to stay off Facebook by my parents because I was threatened on such a high level, and also threatened by the administrators of my school, and also the things and the attacks that I was getting as an individual that came with the visibility of being a Black woman and openly speaking about this racist woman who wanted to privatize education in the United States of America and had been doing it in the city of Detroit since I was born in 1999. I think that using avenues, because you can hide behind a screen, you can hide behind pictures, you can hide behind these things and still push out avenues against peace. And so I think it's very powerful in making sure that we feel protection as we are continuing to talk about the things we want to talk about and not use social media just as a platform or an image that we want to uphold. We are constantly using it to replicate authenticity and constantly using it to raise awareness. And so I think that that's very powerful, especially within my personal experience.
Okay, thank you, Dana.
Yes.
Can you give us challenges and opportunities in the African continent?
Yes, in the African continent, and I love Prof. here was speaking about the demographic dividend. And Africa, the bigger percentage, about 85%, are the young people, just like India. And that alone represents a labor force. If economically fostered, if economically empowered, they can become serious peace drivers. And that is, I think, what we want to address. And it's directly linked with the challenge. So what is hindering meaningful youth participation in YPS? Number one is access to financial opportunities. The access to rupees is very hard for our young people to be able to add money in their pocket. You know, when the youth has money in the pocket, they don't think about going to the streets to fight. because they have a business in the street. And that is what we see in Africa. Africa now, if we are struggling to ensure that our young people have money in their pockets. They will not go to the streets to fight because they know they have a business in the street. That is one thing, access to the financial muscle. The second one is, of course, skills development and capacity development. What TAGe and the UNESCO team is doing here is something that needs to be increased. And I was glad when we were talking about city of peace, city of literature. That is what Africa needs right now, to also ensure that when young people have access to education, skills, and not only skills in general of other things, but peace-related skills, peace-fostering skills, is something that Africa needs, especially my city, Kampala. Kampala has in a day, about 40 million people, and the bigger majority, about 80%, are young people in the city alone. So that alone tells you there is a lot that needs to be done in the city. So when youth have access to finance, when the youth have access to skills development, when the youth have access to these vocational trainings that we see, they themselves become drivers of peace. They will not be able to engage in violent extremist activities because they actually have something to lose on the street. But why do we see this in Africa now? Is because we, the young people, have nothing to lose. The businesses are for the rich people. But the rich people are like 1% of the total population. So let's go and fight. So when we have that, then that is the issue. Then lastly, which is also very important, access to political opportunities. Youth need to be in, when we were passing in the streets of Kerala, I was seeing posters. People are campaigning to go to the government. The same thing right now in my country, Kampala, now Uganda, people are planning 2025 and 2026 is the year of elections. People are now planning. But the question is it accessible for the young people? No. If we have very many young people in political positions, they become the key drivers of peace because they understand our challenges. We understand our problems more than our people. They will begin telling you history. For us when we were young people, we used to do this. But when we have an MP who is young, he will understand what we are struggling with as the young people. So that's what we want. Let the political positions happen. There should be easy access to finance with low interest loans. There should be easy access to vocational and skills training. And that will set the pace for YPS agenda. And that's how we shall be able to solve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Iran, what do you think about challenges and opportunities for the youth in building peace?
So I feel youth today is, more open to new changes, and they have this in them this willingness to challenge the established norms, making them natural risk takers who are capable of challenging the practices that perpetuates conflict. So all of this will allow youths to make meaningful contributions towards sustainable development. And one thing I feel would be restrictive in this process is the age-related barriers that they might face in accessing the decision-making procedure. So where they are often considered as too immature or to participate or take active roles in city functions. So and when our youth are not properly involved in the decision making, we end up with policy programs that fail to meet their needs effectively. So there is this need to incentivize youth participation in decision making to begin with.
Okay, thank you very much, Iran. So now I'll turn to the decision makers. Mr. Shinoda, you've heard from the youth. So they are recognized on one hand, but also challenged, silenced, and they need to have access to many sectors. We've seen politics is very important. So what do you think as a decision maker?
Well, I feel I'm so much pleased to be here. I feel so much honored to be here to have 6 voices, let's say, in concrete manners that address SDG-oriented problems in their own concrete, lively manners. Talking about challenges and opportunities would be the creation of the linkage between problems and the solutions. We are talking about change, but in order for us to visualize change, we need to think of the problems. We need to analyze the nature of the problems or challenges, and then we visualize the goals, solutions, or opportunities. But the problem, the real problem at this moment is that the nature of the problem we faced, let's say 10 years, almost 10 years ago, trying to succeed through the framework of MDGs, decision makers almost like 10 years ago tried to interpret the existing problems 10 years ago in their own way, being faced with the new situations. But the nature of the problem has been already changing, and it will constantly change. We really desperately need the voices of young people who constantly try to interpret the problems in their own ways and concrete manners, try to update the contents of the problems based on the reality of our world. And I'm so much pleased to hear that there are so many concrete, lively, enthusiastic voices that are trying to interpret the problems in this own way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, what about you? Challenges, opportunities?
Yeah. So let me say this. First and foremost, shout out to UNESCO and this amazing conversation, because it's bringing youth together in settings like this that help to foster an exchange of ideas and to rekindle a fire and to really get that, you know, catalyst to go out and continue doing the work. I'm 56 now, and I say that proudly, but I started in this work on my first campaign when I was a teenager, knocking on doors in Detroit and going out campaigning. And so I was really ambitious. And so you got to have persistence too, because if you think back, if I think back 30 plus years, 40 years of how long it's taken just to get to where I am today, I ran for the legislature. I didn't win the first time. Some of you will call it parliament, but I served 6 years in Michigan's legislature. And I'm glad that I had an opportunity to do that, because that's where the laws are made that impact our communities and youth. And so oftentimes youth don't understand, as Imlat pointed out, having that access to political power. Even as adults, some of us in inner city, urban communities, or areas that are not as wealthy as others don't have access to that funding either. I ran for Congress, US Congress, in 2022, and I raised close to $300,000. About $80,000 to $90,000 was my own money. But even in that race, that was nothing compared to $9 million US dollars that was poured into that race. Could I compete at that scale? $9 million can buy a lot of TV advertisement, can buy a lot of mailers, and you name it. And so it's understanding that voting age in many countries, they're having a debate whether they should take it to 16. In most places, it's about 18 years old. But having our youth participate at scale is important, very important, but not be discouraged by the fact that you don't have access to capital, because, as been stated, the access to technology, internet, social media platforms helps to bridge some of the disadvantages of not having that capital. But there should be key components that explore the importance of all facets when we're in the organizing space, so we don't just organize and don't participate in the elective process, because it's critical in order to gain access to changing policy. You either have the lobbyists on the outside, the very wealthy corporations on the outside who are paying to continue advancing their agenda, or we have a construct whereas we support young people and people who are committed to justice for all, as number 16 says in our sustainable development goals. We're advancing those type of candidates to go and represent us, and we support them holistically so that they will continue running and winning, so that they can actually change policy. So I see that I think there's opportunities. I know there's challenges, but I think with the right type of movement, a movement can't be stopped once the fire has been ignited in our young people to move, despite the lack of access to capital.
Okay, so you encourage young people to engage in politics, even
100%.
they're okay.
100. Talk to lawmakers. Go and lobby. Go to the capitals. Write them. Hold them accountable. And making sure that you understand what they say versus how they vote. And then you can understand how to actually get involved. But don't stop there. Become staff members. Work in their office. Become interns. Because a lot of the work that I learned before running for office, I actually interned for Congressman John Conyers. I actually worked for 2 city council members in my city. So before I actually ran for office, I worked and I interned and I volunteered and I learned how to do a campaign. I learned how to fundraise. I learned how to host an event before I actually had to have that skill set. And so it's important for our young people to get involved, even if it's not your exact candidate of choice. Get involved so you can understand the science of politics and running for office and winning in office.
And change the things from the inside.
Change it from the inside. Become policy makers. And sometimes, to be perfectly honest, even if they don't become the actual candidate that's elected to office, if you are experienced in working in the background and writing policy, you can actually influence your member who is elected to support the right policy position because you're researching policy, you're writing policy, you're giving them the information. Because a lot of politicians are in the front ground, but a lot of them don't have the heart and the passion or the knowledge always to do what is right. They just have charisma, they've been elected, and they're the face that you see in the front. But you need the people who work on their team as well, and oftentimes our young people can be in those roles and help influence policy in the right direction.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Professor Tudu, what do you think about challenges and opportunities for the youth?
In fact, I fully endorse what you have said. You know, people, particularly the youth, have to be actively involved in the political process. And to be more specific regarding challenges, the most important issue the youth would face is a lack of opportunities or denial of opportunities due to the disparities that exist in societies. I would say even in developed societies, that kind of disparities and discriminations do exist. And how to overcome these issues is a big question. And again, there is a socio-economic stratification among the youth. Youth of an affluent background would be able to capture and grab opportunities much easier manner. We take the example of a very poor household, a youth belonging to a very poor household with less socio-economic background. It would be difficult for them to grab the opportunities. So again, when you talk about opportunities to be given to the youth, you have to consider this issue of providing opportunities to the weaker sections of the society. How do you do that? Say, for example, India has got a considerable population of Dalits. Dalits are the down caste, in the sense they were considered to be outcast at some point of time. We are trying to bring them to the mainstream. Even now, they have not been able to make their presence shown in the number of official positions in the government. Their proportion is very less. So such specific issues do exist in many countries. Citing example from India, we can see any number of such people being denied opportunities to come up in the ladder of development, and that's very difficult. And another issue is the most likely thing that would happen is the failure of the government to formulate policies in view of the requirements of the youth. It does not happen at all. You have an analysis of the policy environment which exists in different countries. You can see the policies are not conducive to foster the participation of youth in any of such activities. And another important issue is how do you involve in public action and political action. That's a very important point. Unless the youth get orientation to involve actively in political action, in public action, they would not be able to become policy makers of the future. So unless you have some transformative education process which should be unleashed by the governments to make people aware of the democratic process, to make people participate in the process of decision making, then I think it will be difficult for us to have good people at the helm of affairs. And regarding the the opportunities, I think there are vast opportunities, particularly in the context of social media and the information communication technologies. You know, advancements in technology would certainly bring people together. You can have vast networks of youth organizations interacting with each other, even within the country, and also maybe interacting with organizations outside. We have been talking about youth cooperatives, which can make a big change with respect to service delivery and production, innovation, etc., technology transfer, and so many other new emerging areas. And also, we have to have maybe we have to have some substratum, platform to make this happen. How do you come together? And that too without divisive understanding of the society, rather constructive understanding of the society, for a futuristic world which is going to be much more even, just, and peaceful.
Okay, so thank you. So engaging in politics, to have more access to education, also to funds. Eric, can you tell us about more about that, because it was very short and brief when you told us about the fact that youth are not fully focused on solving the problems because they are, in lack of funds. If you can just tell us a word on that.
Yeah, so for example, like the other peace builders here, we have developed the vision, we know what we can do, we have ideas on how to bring change, but the reality is that we still have to pay the bills. So it means, for example, myself, I'm again applying for jobs, likely in the industry of the status quo, the current situation, maybe within the war industry, the situation that leads to the current problems. So exactly for the solutions, for the youth that have visions for peace, the wealth of nations is now being directed to the world at war. However, if the wealth of nations will be directed to the youth, to the visions of peace, for the actual the job creation, that our creativity can be used for a better world, at the moment it's lacking. When you look at the current jobs, a lot of jobs are within maybe the military, within police, within the current system. But the change, the revolutionary vision for peace, there are no jobs, there are no finances, there is no resources, and I think it comes back to the choice of the wealth of nations. Where do they want to invest their money? If they want to invest in a world that's going to destroy itself, keep investing in the current way, but if they want to have a new world, start to use the wealth of nations for the youth, job creations, and make it possible that we actually are going to change this world, instead of being forced to pay the bills at a job.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. We'll move to our third part of the debate. What can the decision makers do to help youth in contributing to building peace regarding to the SDG and YPS agenda? So please feel free to tell them what do you need from them, and also what you can do for them. So Andre, please, if you can start.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm actually going to build on what Eric just mentioned. I think when we are discussing empowering and supporting youth in working towards peace, we first need to kind of consider that there may be pressing needs that exist, whether it's a financial kind of difficulty, whether there is like risk of violence or direct threat or indirect threat. And I think understanding the different instances of violence, of indirect violence, and how that can be manifested and how that can be received and experienced by young people, it's very important in then finding the way to create the ground for young people to feel like their input is relevant and be comfortable enough to kind of want to contribute to these efforts. And I also think that it might be useful to consider that young people were often called to respond to already made decisions, to act upon already taken kind of steps. So being included in the decision-making process and the reviewing of policy processes, even before in the consultation process. I know that there are certain municipalities and certain government bodies around in different places, and from what we've discussed as a group before, that have this in place. But this is not the experience everywhere. Maybe not at least reflecting on my own experience from Nicosia in Cyprus. So this is not something that can be taken for granted. So I think including young people and the experience and the perspective and even the aspirations when making decisions would also be something that can allow young people to then come and reflect. And that's where also accountability can come in, right? So seeing youth and young people as a relevant stakeholder in these discussions and then being accountable to them is also something that we need to cultivate, if I may call it as such. So I think there are a lot of layers to unravel. There's a lot of constant kind of exchange that needs to be taking place. And I know that there is a lot of different expressions of conflict around different communities, different cities, countries. Within communities themselves, there's a lot of expressions of discrimination and marginalization, and remaining vigilant and remaining aware of all of these, and understanding the context. I mean, Mr. Yuji also mentioned about the importance of how all of these decisions and these goals are coming to be. I mean, where all of this is coming from is very important, and how that can be perceived locally is also very important. So, yeah, that's my input.
Okay, so the decision-making process needs to be more inclusive and to involve the youth actively, otherwise it's not enough.
I think in a more kind of consistent way throughout the process, because we're often called to kind of respond to something that has already been taken for granted, and then that makes it very difficult to kind of constructively engage with it, oftentimes.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Irene, please, if you have something to ask to the decision makers to help the youth, you know, in building peace regarding the SDGs and YPS agenda, this is the perfect moment to ask. What do you need from them?
I think they need to promote and make more investments in youth participation, preferably investments from local level itself instead of going for foreign aids. So that's one thing, and they also need to ensure that power and whatever resources are shared, you know, across generations and stakeholders. And also, as we've already discussed, I think there the structural barriers to participation needs to be identified, and they can institutionalize their participation. That's what I have to add.
Okay, but like you have an opportunity to ask for directly the decision makers who are here. What can they do concretely?
Yes, okay.
What do you need them to do?
Would be supporting them financially, and yeah, would be one thing. And if there are, I would like to ask if there are any investments made towards improving youth and participation.
Okay, thank you very much. Dana, please. So if you have something to ask to the decision makers, how can they help youth in building peace? Can you tell us, like, this moment is so unique, you can ask.
Yeah, I would like for the decision makers here at the table to tell us about an experience when a mentor, somebody that had the position that you were searching for, that you could see yourself have in 20 years, and what did they do or what they didn't do that gave you a spark to keep going? And let me know if I need to reframe it.
Yes, but can you ask for more from them? They are here.
Yeah, so I'm curious about your experience and how, so when you were starting off on your journey, what there, you know, we need affirmations, just like with our mothers, our fathers, and in our career life, we need it from mentors or teachers. And however who was the mentor, who was the teacher that sparked it in, and how are you still making sure that spark is being recycled in your own community with the youth that you are connected to?
Mr. Shinoda, would you like to answer?
Can I spend 2 minutes now?
Yes.
Okay. When I was a university student, the Cold War was ending. And then I participated in the international peacekeeping operations that was held in Cambodia in 1993, for instance, as an international polling station officer when I was 24 years old and so on. And then eventually I took a position in academia to do research on international peace operations and so on, to try to solve the problems in the world of international peace operations and so on. Well, quite frankly, we would like to feel that we have proposed some perspectives to solve the problems, but there are some new problems emerging in the last 3 decades or so. And so this is a continuation of the solutions and the recognition of new problems. Quite frankly, we senior people are...
Thank you. Navina, please, if you have to ask the decision makers today, what can they do to help you?
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I think one of my major points has already been spoken. I would ask them for a new funding mechanism to invest on youth peaceful initiatives. I always have this question whenever I meet decision makers in the room, because they have the influence even with donors and even with individuals. Where is the money for young people? Like, young people are doing amazing work from grassroots level. But when it comes to the statistics of how many young people are receiving these resources, there's not enough data. There's also not enough backup reasons as to why young people are not receiving these resources. Right now, funding mechanisms are so restrictive. So I would also ask them if they can organize maybe a meeting with influential donors and individuals who can allocate unrestricted funding for young people. We've heard of Andre speaking of the work in Cyprus. I have worked with young people in rural communities where it's so hard to have all necessary documents in place. So is it possible for us to just be trusted with the money, even if it's small, and create impact? The most key takeaway from me is that all our decision makers in one way or the other are in the academia and research field. So I think it's high time that I would ask them, is it possible to collaborate with us to do a more evidenced work like research, put out a policy brief or put out a report which informs of how so many other young people are doing great work on peace building initiatives, so that donors can trust from that information, because there's no data. One last, just 1 minute. I would also ask them, is it possible for them to implement an observatory project, which I myself am willing to volunteer to connect them with other young people to show the impact of digital technologies in bringing employment opportunities. Most young people, we are faced with an employment problem. But when wars happen, we are positioned at the front to go to wars for our nations. So where are our jobs? Digital technologies have now created a new marketplace that is virtual jobs or remote working jobs. For instance, can I ask our decision maker from Detroit, is it possible that young people from Tanzania can work for some companies in the USA remotely? Is that possible? Is it something that can come out of this? If it's a yes, then I am willing to connect those young people, even I myself. These remote works could even be volunteering, because we go to interviews and we are told you do not have enough experience. So what is that experience? We are ready to step in if we are given those opportunities. So I would ask, I would want to ask her. I would also want to ask others if it's possible to implement those observatory projects to show that digital technologies have impact to young people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I would really like to hear an answer.
She will answer.
So thank you for the direct question. In short, with respect to opportunities to, let's just say for Detroit, we've had various exchange programs and opportunities, and I think being exposed to this organization, I'm looking forward to strengthening those relationships, and hopefully Detroit can not only be a sister city to South Africa, but also to Tanzania, to Uganda, and others. And so, yes, I'm willing to help make those connections so that we can have the exchange, because through the exchange is where we truly change the conversation, the dialogue, policies, and impacting for culture. But what I want to say about this, I heard Dana's question, I hear yours, and they're kind of combined. When I think about where I come from in my early 20s of having a desire to wanting to change, I started one of my first nonprofits in 2001. I didn't know all the rules, I didn't know all the laws, but I knew in order to really get grant dollars, I had to work within that construct. So I don't think it's realistic to ask for the removal of the laws. That's not going to happen, especially with the U.S. Giving grant dollars and so on. But what we can do is make sure we simplify the process, and so you understand and work with other umbrella organizations so that you may not be the direct NGO or nonprofit, but you might be an agent for change under an umbrella that allows you to get access to many grants and then grow your knowledge on how to apply and become your own NGO or 501c3, et cetera. So exchanging those ideas, making sure you have the tools that are necessary. And I want to encourage our young people to know that the world has become smaller globally because of the use of innovation, the internet. So think about advancing your work, but also think about opportunities, because all the skill sets that you've mentioned, you can also financially benefit from some of your skill sets to help fund some of your work as well. So don't play yourself cheap. When you're offering your services to people globally, internationally, etc., you can put a price tag to it and still be an activist. And that's something that I had to learn, because I've given away my services for years because I believe in the fight. But there are other people outside of the fight that would pay for your service as well. So you can also self-fund in many respects. But closed mouths don't get fed. So continue to ask. Be audacious enough to go into corporations. When you get that opportunity on the elevator, having lunch, wherever you are, tell them your vision. Ask for what you want. And if you don't have the mechanism to get it in the construct that they're used to delivering it, they will be compelled to help you structure your ask in a way that you can get it. And so that's how I got my first grant from AT&T almost 30 years ago, because I didn't know how to apply for a grant, but someone helped me apply for that grant, and I did receive the funding back then for access to technology for youth. So don't be afraid to ask, and don't ask small, ask big.
Thank you, Jerry. Eric, so you have to ask, and you have to ask big. Decision makers are here. You can ask them big and tell us what do you want to tell them.
Excellent. That also brings us to what are we asking for? And I think the things we want to change, connecting youth roadmap to peace, we can do it the slow way and we can do it the fast way. The slow way is just the normal way, but the fast way will be a youth revolution. So actually an acceleration of the power towards the youth at this moment to solve the problems of the world. So my question to the decision makers, to everyone which are currently, because of experience, because of age, already in the positions, do you want to become our allies, the allies of the youth? Do you want to help us to bridge the, from our perspective to the funds, to the wealth of nations at this moment? Do you want to guide us with your experience? So do you want to help us make this youth revolution a possibility? That's my question.
So, Professor, if you can answer. Eric is asking the decision makers to be allies.
This specific question?
Specific,
this
and
specific
also
question?
larger.
Yeah, the other questions,
Yeah.
okay. In fact, I have a few personal experiences being a member of the State Planning Board, which plans 5-year plans for the state. We have given much emphasis to the issues of youth in several ways possible. To start with, we have been able to, I would tell you, Dr. Joy also had mentioned about that. We had tried to build up platforms where the youth can come together and maybe contribute voluntarily or involuntarily for that matter. So there has been, say for example, we have got a youth brigade, particularly working on disaster management. After we had experienced the floods in 2018 and 19, we had tried to teach them different ways of resilience and also how to manage disasters. How can they be a workforce so that they can jump into action when there is a disaster? So we have got a much better capability, much better trained youth brigade now to deal with such disasters. That has been one instance where a disaster has been made into an opportunity. We had been able to teach people as to how to deal with disasters, So the government has taken an initiative to make platforms for youth to come together. And also I recollect at this moment an exemplary work done by one of our youth organizations, which is a political organization, which distributes food to the poor folks who are coming to our public health systems, particularly the medical colleges. Medical colleges in Kerala are places where you are treating the poor. Only the poor come over there. They are all public institutions. And most of the relatives do not have the means to have food, They have to be bystanders and they do not have resources to buy food. There is an organization which is distributing hundreds and hundreds of packets of food. How do they do that? They do collect it from households and they aggregate it and distribute it among people. Such initiatives of volunteerism, as she said, has created a lot of synergy in the society. So the government should also step in to create such platforms so that youth can come together. And secondly, regarding funding, funding is an excellent option that you have cited. We in Kerala had tried to have say for example, a gender budget. So at the end of the budget presentation, we would segregate those elements which have got some gender responsive actions, We put that together and we present it as a separate budget, which would reflect what is the emphasis of the budget on gender parity and gender related issues. Likewise, we can also think of a youth budget wherein the components for which money will have to be spent on youth affairs can be segregated together and will be segregated and they can be put together to make a youth budget. This is something the decision makers can think of. And most prominently, if this has to happen, there should be more investment in education, research and development. Because research and development primarily is going to be done by the youth. Education also is meant for the youth. So unless you have increased or enhanced investment in education, nothing would happen. So a country like India has got only less than 1% of its GDP in education R&D, which is, I would say, abysmally low, which has to be increased. It has to be minimum 5% of your GDP. Unless you increase this investment in education, the youth would not be in an advantageous position. So this is something which the decision makers can make. And maybe skilling and better opportunity is another important aspect. Maybe skilling is very much important. Skill sets are changing day by day. And unless you catch hold of what is happening outside your sphere and update yourself as to what changes are happening in technology and skilling, you have to have vast systems of skilling, people. So investment has to be done on those lines also. So that would certainly bring in changes. And second, the next one is maybe the creating employment opportunities and participation in the political activity. These two things have to be done locally, I would say. The creating employment opportunities is a bigger question. It depends on your economic policy, it depends on investment from outside, foreign direct investment and ever so many other things. But unless the government has a policy to invest, to make opportunities, as you said, it is going to be difficult. And being part of the political process is something which has to be done by the youth. They have to realize that they have to be in the political process. They have to lead the nation. They have to lead the processes. As she said, you can enter as a volunteer and then be there without anticipating any returns. But still, maybe at the end of the day, they would be having huge experience gaining out of that process. And they certainly would let you know how to formulate policies and be instrumental in the process of policy making. So these are all the, I think, general recommendations which I have got to tell you as a maybe so-called decision maker.
Okay, thank you. So access to funding, platforms for the youth, employment, education, all do these together to help the youth, and the decision makers can be the allies and can work together with the youth. So Emlat, you'll have the last word. So you have the chance to ask whatever you want today.
Yes,
from
no,
the decision makers.
it's always good to end last. You have listened, and I think for me, listening, they have raised they have preempted some of my asks already. They have already preempted, but nonetheless, I think it's also just good to reiterate that you've raised education. And now what we see, what we would ask the policymakers specifically, and my colleagues have talked about it, Dana and my brother Eric, it's on, and of course my sister also from Tanzania. It's technology, digital literacy, which now is becoming the army. Now we have ChatGPT that can do everything and anything right now. So instead of what we are now seeing, we are already seeing some governments already fighting ChatGPT. Let's do this, let's curb it before it becomes a menace. So how they realize the youth are taking advantage of it. That's why they want to curb it. How do we then ensure that our policymakers embrace the technology that our young people have created through ChatGPT, invest in it and make the best use of it? That is one. They should invest and enact policies that are youth focused, are youth responsive, that don't limit youth using technology, but rather enable youth to even think more creatively beyond ChatGPT to use it to actually make better. That's what we want from, that's the ask I would want from the policymakers. And of course, the second one, of course, education, that has already been talked about, investing in more and more in education. That's what we want. The other point is on one that is very funny. You know, when we go to war, when countries go to war, they front, who are the people they front? They are the young people. You go to the Indian army, the Ugandan army in my country, every army are the young people below the age of 30. But when it comes to negotiations of cessation of conflict, they are the old people. Why is it that? And that has become the biggest issue of failing to end wars in the continent and the globe. The mere fact that it's the old people who go to discuss and the young people go fighting is alone the issue that has failed conflict to continue to stop in the world. Then now what we are asking for our policymakers and our leaders is, if we are going to war, let's go to war together. And when we are coming back to discuss, let's also come back and discuss together. The disparity of going to war, the young people go to war, and we go to discuss, is what has made war not end. And it's in Africa now, what we see are the young people taking into arms. If our Indian population here, the youth here in Kerala, are interested in global news, you will realize in this year alone, Africa has had about over 6-7 coups. Over 6-7 coups. And who are leading the coups are the young people. Currently in Burkina Faso, we have a young president. Currently in Guinea-Bissau, we also have the young people leading the war. Currently in Equatorial Guinea, the young people have taken over power. Why? Because the young people are now realizing these people, when they go to negotiate, they're negotiating for their own, not with us. They're negotiating for their own sustainability. So my ask then is to see our young people participate in the negotiations, which is very key for youth, peace and security agenda. Then of course, of course, as the prof was talking about, at 24, he was participating in Cambodia, I believe, in a peace negotiation, I think, process. You see, Japan realizes youth, the future, they engage. Why not Africa? And that's what we are asking for. Then of course, the other thing, as I wind up, is to do with the mentorship. What TAGe is doing today. TAGe is bringing the old and the young, policymakers and the youth. This needs to be escalated to the downer level. Africa needs to see more of this. We actually need this more in Africa than anywhere else. because the African youth are very violent at times. So if you don't have them on the table with the young people, with the policymakers, it becomes a problem. So we need to see of a decentralized TAGe to the African continent. And we, of course, that is mentorship and apprenticeship programs. She has already hinted on it. Work with these politicians. That apprenticeship program is very important to strengthen the youth participation. Then, of course, the other issue, of course, as I try to wind up, is on the institutions. The African Union. India is part of the Asia Pacific. How then do we see that in these institutions, our young people are represented? Not as puppets. We have institutions that have young people, but they are using young people as puppets. Let's not have young people as puppets. Let's have young people as decision makers. When they propose something, they are taken. If there is an Asian Pacific Council, are young people represented? Are their views heard? And that's why in the African Union, I am very times harsh when we have policymakers on the table. I tell them, no, don't use us as puppets. Don't see a Molot on the table and you think, we have represented the youth since a Molot is here. We want, when I suggest things from the broader youth I represent, you are considering them and implementing them. And that's what we want. Then lastly, as I conclude, and I know we didn't have this, is to ask the young people. At times I've attacked so much the policymakers and given recommendations here, what we want, but also our young people, we need to be proactive. She said something that is very interesting. Share your vision and let them listen to them and act. And TAGe, I think, is trying to create this platform where we share our vision and then be able to facilitate the process of ensuring this vision that we have comes to reality in terms of the youth, peace, and security agenda. So what we want also to see our young people is also being proactive. The young people of Kerala should also be able, if you create the space for you, if the government creates space for you, don't go and sit and eat the cakes and go away. Sit, contribute knowledge, take time to research and share productive knowledge or productive points that the government can be able to pick. This is for the young people. But for the older people, if you involve us, you're safeguarding your retirement. If you don't involve us, your retirement is in jeopardy. So you are safer involving us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emlad. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, but I have to ask you, all of you, for 20 seconds, if you have like a key recommendation from all this debate. Key recommendation. Andre, would you like to start?
Thank you. 20 seconds is very stressful. So I just want to take the moment to reflect a bit on my experience because I worked at a non-profit organization. It's been around for 10 years. It's in working on peace building. We have been able to tap into, let's say, financial kind of grants and work through projects and reports, but sometimes that feels that it's not enough. I think there's a lot of effort in terms of bottom-up work that is being done, and there's also a lot of work, maybe not in the same kind of expressed in the same ways, but there's a lot of top-down and bottom-up work. I think what we might need to see more is an engagement of the two. It's a combination of the forces. Young people cannot change the world themselves. Politicians and political leaders cannot also enforce everything themselves without the citizens, the people. So I think there needs to be a holistic kind of understanding and approach. And we are here, Mahatma Gandhi Peace Institute of Peace and Education, and I think that's where we are lacking, at least in the context where I am, and reflecting on where I come from and why I've been invited to share this experience. We are lacking peace education as a tool across all different disciplines, across all different education levels. And I think peace education can cultivate and can nurture what we have been discussing, the multi-perspectivity, the intersectional thinking, and it can kind of create the grounds for what we are trying to achieve. It was more than 20 seconds, I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you, Andre. Dana, please, one key recommendation, briefly, if possible.
There's nothing directly coming into my mind, but I think that it has been so insightful to learn about everybody else's experience in education here. And so I think just getting out of your own walls of what it means to be educated and what it means to not be educated. Like we know well what it means to not be educated. But learning about how it is in Tanzania, learning about how it is in Uganda. And so I think that just searching on that on your own, getting on Google and just being like, okay, I need to get some hope, you know, from my peers, from the access of information that's already out there.
Okay. Uren, please, one key recommendation.
Yeah, that would be to acknowledge local knowledge of local peace building knowledge at different levels of government bodies and create more avenues like that. This could be through the internships and fellowships that we discussed.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shinoda. If you have one key recommendation.
I just want to somewhat mention the funding because that has been discussed. I really want to stress that funding is investment. I constantly run scholarship program budget, advises JICA governments on some of the expenditures and so on. The way of thinking is that whether or not we should invest our resources in this particular point, in this particular person. But that is a small thing because we feel that we know our problems, so we constantly seek the persons who might provide us with the solutions. But the real investment, the real funding, it comes out of nowhere. And then if you are attractive enough, you can easily cultivate new sources of funding because we constantly need such people. That means that we desperately need people who are able to give solutions to agendas 2030. But the real contributor will be able to provide us with a new set of problems and solutions beyond 2030. You are young enough to attract us beyond 2030. And if you're attractive enough, you just don't have to worry about funding. Funding will hunt you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Navina, please. One last key recommendation, briefly if possible also.
Yes. Practical. My recommendation is practical, not theoretical, digital inclusivity in peace building. When I say practical, not theoretical, is I would wish to see that after this engagement today, we now come into the ground and do implementation of all these recommendations, not just put this in paper. But then when I say of digital inclusivity, I mean that it's high time now we have to acknowledge cross-border young people working on peace building in their diversities. That is women, young people living with disabilities, minority young people that are from groups that are even not easily seen on the internet, and so many other diversity groups to be included. But then when I say digital, what I mean here is for us to all acknowledge that technology, especially digital technology, plays a role in peace building. That is the current technology we all know about, social media platforms, the use of internet, but there's also the potentiality of emerging technology like artificial intelligence and virtual reality. Looking at, for instance, the war that's happening now in Gaza, most of us probably don't understand, but if we had virtual reality machines here in the room and someone takes us through what's happening to transform our emotion, our intelligence and and our emotions on what's happening, probably every one of us would get out here in the room and shout at government, at decision makers to do something. So I would say that key recommendation from here is making digital inclusivity practical, not theoretical. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Please.
So I'd say taking this cohort of youth that you have here today and expanded it into a fellowship that would help support the youth with action plans that align with the sustainable goals. Having actionable steps over the next 6-7 years to support that work. Some of it, I think, could go into a plan of work for many of them for their PhDs. Some of them, it could go into developing and expanding in a more extensive way their NGOs or their nonprofits. but they would have a support group that'll give them the skill sets, the tools, access to thought leaders, and more to align their work and to aim towards that goal of 2030 with actionable, sustainable steps and support along the way. I think in doing that, and even if there were other cohorts before them, it would give them the support that they need when they go back to their respective communities and countries.
Okay, thank you. Professor Juju, if you have one key recommendation, 20 seconds, please. I know it's very short.
I have 3 recommendations. We should think of a youth policy by every government, in view of the SDG goals and also in view of the emerging challenges. And that should take into consideration the requirements of the youth population in every country. That is one thing which we can recommend. And second one is there has to be extensive formal, informal, as well as non-formal mechanisms for mentorship, for mentoring the youth on various issues. So that is something which has to be done extensively across the country, across the world. Every country should have that kind of network, particularly in the African continent as well as in the Asian continent. We have to have that kind of mechanism. And third one is we have to disown and we have to rebut the divisiveness and communal issues, particularly in countries like India. We have to have a more secular and more democratic consensus building among the youth, which has to be fostered as a cultural exchange program. That there are 3 recommendations which I have about to tell you.
Thank you. Emlat, one last recommendation before Eric, because he will close this part of the debate.
Yes, this usually, the same recommendation I usually tell the heads of states of the African Union, and it's one I also borrowed from the Secretary General of the United Nations. It's on collaboration. He emphasizes collaboration. Government, civil society, and all these other actors should collaborate with the youth. And he emphasizes that you should collaborate with the youth as equal partners. The issue we have, you bring youth together, but you treat them less of partners. It should be equal partners. And I think the United Nations and the Secretary General has even, I think, an agenda, a policy brief on how you should be able to engage youth. And I relate so much to that because what we have seen over time, you collaborate with the youth, but you disregard just to fill the numbers, but not to take them serious. So what we want is collaboration, meaningful collaboration, and treating youth as equal partners. And of course, before I end, I would want to give shout outs to my colleagues from Benin and the Kenya there. This is also a reason of collaboration. And I think they are here because of collaboration, I believe. I think they should see you. Let them just raise your hand and see, hey, those are our people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. And Eric, please, you have the last word, the last key recommendation.
Yeah, so we have to realize where are we at this moment. We are in the birthing place of peaceful revolutions, of Gandhi, of the vision of Gandhi. We are with representatives of all peace cities of the world, with the youth here of India. Let's start this youth revolution today, right now, together in this group. So I would ask you to, when this is over, let's connect, let's engage, let's start planning, because the most important thing we need to do to make this youth revolution a possibility is to get organized. So let's start organizing today and then make this a reality. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So now we will open the Q&A session, but before that, we will ask you again to answer, please, to the question about how you are feeling right now using the menti.com website and the code that you can see, 696604449. And then you'll be able to ask all the questions you want to our panelists. If you finish it, okay. So now we'll open the Q&A session. So please feel free to ask your questions to our panelists. Anika is over there and with the mic. So just tell us if you want to ask a question. It's always difficult to ask the first question, but then it's easier. So there's someone over there.
Hi, I'm Habib Rahman from Thrissur. Currently, I'm doing here studying for competitive exams. What I want to ask that even we have many international organizations, UNESCO, UNICEF, and blah 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 blah, and we are talking these peace talks and all. And I think the very first foremost thing want to do that this program is not reaching these very minorities, right? So why that not reaching these minority sections and all?
So who'd like to answer? Please, sorry, if you can just briefly ask the question a second time.
We have more programs, more events, more programs, and these programs not reaching the grassroots, right? Yeah, the minority communities. So why this not reaching to the grassroots?
Professor Juju, would you like to? Andre,
I'm happy to.
please.
I can start. I'm happy to share and maybe reflect on where I come from and where we are operating. So I work at a non-profit organization working in the buffer zone that kind of continues to divide Cyprus. So we are pretty much the minority in the island working on peace building. But what you've mentioned, it's very relevant to how we see our work moving forward, because we are able to engage with, let's say, the biggest communities of the island, which are the Greek Cypriot and the Turkish Cypriot communities on the island. But we do have a very difficult time reaching out to minority groups, to people who are not as comfortable as coming to the events and the activities and the projects that we organize. So I think this is I don't know if it's shared with colleagues here, but there is a difficulty in what we call the bubble of peace building. We preach to the converted, let's say. We engage with usual suspects. So I think reflecting on the work that we do as, let's say, peace builders or civil society actors at least, there needs to be more awareness. And I think this is going back to why I started and ended with understanding the experience of people and how different experiences people have, and how they experience peace and experience violence differently. And I think there is a very difficult task of understanding everyone's perspective and kind of being able to appeal to everyone's needs. But I think definitely peace building efforts need to be more open and need to be more inclusive of other groups. I mean, reflecting on our work, this is definitely something we're trying to focus on.
Thank you. Would you like to also add something?
Since he has asked a question that these issues have not come to the grassroots, I would like to point out that maybe not at the behest of the UN program, even otherwise, we had factored the issues of sustainability into the local level programs. You can just go through the publications of the Kerala Institute of Local Administration and also the guidelines issued by the government of Kerala. We have factored all these issues, particularly the role of youth and SDGs and all these issues which we have discussed right now have been made part of the government program. And many training programs and empowerment programs are going on with these objectives. And I can talk to you about these details later if you want, if you're interested.
Thank you. Emlot, like very briefly, please, because we have another question there.
Yes, no, mine is usually simple, that whenever you ask the young people who are privileged to attend these events, we become the ambassadors of peace. So you have learned the information. I think the question would be, I also want to replicate this in be that way, it's good. But I love the idea. But the idea is when you have this, and I think that I think you would probably reach out to them and be like, I want to do this in my community. Then you become the ambassador of peace. Instead of them coming to your society, you can actually make them come to your society by suggesting an initiative. So the goal is, let's be champions and ambassadors of peace, especially when we attend this. There should be a trickle-down effect, starting from you. Even me, I'm going back to Uganda and Africa to take a trickle-down. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. Anika, we have a question over there.
Hello, yeah. My name is Sampreet, and I'm from Kannur district, the northern part of Kerala. So my question is, continuation to his, and also I was not there during the introduction, so I don't know his name. He's from Africa, I think. Yeah. Yes. So he also mentioned about whenever youth are being part of such initiatives. Me personally, I've experienced it. Is that we are there to show the numbers, or in most of the cases, it's kind of a tokenism. Yes, youth are present there, and also when we try to initiate a movement or any kind of movement, there is a lack of funds. There are organizations that are connected to UN or any other organizations that are able to fund, but the new upcoming organizations find it difficult to have a foot in this social sector, in peace or any other sector. So my question is, from your own journeys, what are support system that you have had, and the support system that we can use as young social entrepreneurs that are working in this sector or any other sector in social entrepreneurship? And how did you overcome these challenges of finding the fundraising, or connecting with the relevant entities that can support us in this venture?
Eric, would you like to answer?
Yeah, so my experience is that the allies are essential in who can be the allies. So when we depend on the United Nations or their institutes, they will be overwhelmed. But more and more I see that when youth get organized, they pressure their governments or local governance, and they again help them, the business communities, to create a very strong demand or very strong pool for that financing. So I think first organizing ourselves as a youthful voice, then use that organized voice to pressure and to ask our own local and national governments, and they will help us to connect to the more wealthy companies, or creating the narrative that the youth need those funds.
Would you like to answer, Orsanavina? Yes, please.
Thank you so much for the question. I think I like the question because it gives us an opportunity to tell a story and to inspire each other. So as for me, I think I'll just tap into what one of the speakers said. Tell your story. Last year, I designed a program for young people. I wanted to replicate the knowledge I know on digital safety and security to other young people so that they can protect themselves online. The organization I was working with didn't have enough resources for that. But one of the support system I got is the director told me, implement the idea, innovate it without having any cost, zero budget project. So what I had to do is to engage the program online. So the first support system is the structures of the organization themselves. So I would say that it's good to look out for people who can trust in your idea. But then I used avenues like this to tell my story. I remember I went to a conference in Nairobi and I was networking with one of the girls in Ethiopia, and I told her about the program, and the biggest challenge is that I didn't have resources. So what she did is sent an email to recommend me to a donor, which is a very good lesson I took from that conference. We as young people do not have to compete, but rather we have to collaborate and mention each other. I then received an initial funding. I think it was around 10,000 USD. I was supposed to implement it in Tanzania, that there are other young people in Uganda doing a great work. I extended the program to Uganda. So you'd see the track of the process, like mention each other, collaborate. The program did very well in Uganda than even in Tanzania, and the donor added some more funding for the program. So I would say in short, get mentors that will trust in your idea. Tell your story in any room, even right now. Ask and tell what challenge you are experiencing. But then I keep not marketing. I don't market, but I use social media to show the work that I am doing. Regardless how small you perceive that, someone would look at it and say, wow, this is an amazing work. I remember one of the team members at TAGe, when she reached out to me, I didn't have to put out 10 pages. I just sent in links of my work from social media platforms. So let us tell our story and trust the process. It's not so easy to get the funding in 1 month. It took me a year for the donor to say, I am giving you this funding. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Navina. We have also another question there.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Anze, and I'm representing a social entrepreneurship named 021. And we also got so many vows while we are presenting some programs or some proposal to legislators or so many other peoples and after that they say two objections we get. One is like, if we have one tangible object, they are ready to give so many fund for if we need to buy a sewing machine and give to some people, but they are not ready to give no resource for a qualitative project. One obstacle we face, it's facing for about 2 to 3 years while we are trying. They said like it's a work project, but we can't fund a resource for it. And another thing, the most of the legislators said like, the once you said like, yeah, we can fund, we can do this project, but one way zero budget project, or else you need to find the project by fund the project by yourself by finding the sponsors. And it's become so difficult to do this type of journeys in these situations. Like, we are backing out so many projects, we are putting it in the paper back here. It's not happening in ground. It's happening in peace education also, peace education, experiential education. Yeah, actually we are working in completely concentrated on a sustainable development goal 4, but it's not happening. We are getting some sessions in KILA, we are getting some sessions with Kudumba, not many more. It's not getting ground level or something or else.
So what's the question? I'm sorry.
So, Professor, would you like to answer to this question?
You are representing a non-governmental organization, or how is it? You are representing a NGO? Social entrepreneurship. So in fact, there has been some problems with funding of late in India. The free flow of funds, particularly for non-government organizations, have subsided due to some restrictive measures by the central government. We have to openly tell that there has been some restrictions on foreign exchange and so many other issues. Most of these, even big NGOs, are under scanner for various reasons. That is one mega policy environment which exists as of now. That is one thing. And secondly, as I said, you have to have more investment in research and development and education. Unless you have more investment from the government side, your projects are not going to be funded at all. There is paucity of funds, particularly because of the economic distress after COVID in India and also in Kerala for that matter. So there are issues with regard to funding. Unless you gain the project out of its merit, out of its very unique objectives, out of the fact that this is absolutely necessary, out of the conviction of the policymakers, then it is very difficult for us to get a project. That is true. We have quite a handful of agencies which do that. Basically, we have the funding agencies, we have domestic funding agencies. Say, for example, the Kerala State Education, the Environment Council. And also we have the Ministry, the Department of Climate Change, Environment. There are only a very few entities which give you funds. So we don't have so many such institutions. That is one reason why I said we have to have more institutions which can engage in public research like what you do, encourage social action by organizations like you. Unless we have that kind of environment, an youngster like her would be in distress after maybe going after several people and she will have to have a tendency to discard the entire project at some point of time. So quite, I mean, absolutely, I am with you. We know that there are issues. It's very difficult for us to find funds. You have to increase the investment in education and also funding. That is something which has to be taken as a policy, which the government should do.
Is there any question? Ah, yes. One.
Hi, I'm Arun, and I think Navina and Dana,
Navina and Dana.
right? They talked about about social media, about the role of internet in possibly fracturing communities or actually being more divisive than perhaps uniting in a way, right? So Navina also mentioned that, of course, we are having a conflict in Gaza, and there is, of course, all of us somewhere we know about it because, well, it's been brought out on center stage, and we can say that either of the belligerents have some sort of voice in some way or the other, right? This is some conflict that's constantly in our attention. But just a little while back, there was a huge conflict in Eritrea where almost 2 lakh to 6 lakh people died. And similarly, there are conflicts in other parts in Asia. There's huge famines in Somalia and other places. And somehow the media as such seems to ignore what is inconvenient, right? I'd really like somebody to answer this because, I mean, while we all care about human life and people should have peace, however, we seem to selectively focus on some certain issues while conveniently neglecting entirely. The reason I know about the war in Eritrea was just because there was a student who was studying with me in college, and he had his wife and kids, and he couldn't reach out to them. And he was telling me this entire ordeal, and by the time I found out that there was actually some kind of war going on, there's more from 2 lakh to 6 lakh people dead. Now, we can say that currently the media has prevented the disaster in Gaza becoming much worse than it could have. We're at least paying attention. So can I have some responses on this, please?
Yeah, so for sure there are differences between the mainstream media and what you can find on social media. So this is why you have to try to find information. I don't know if Dana would like to answer.
I think that this is a very important and powerful question. I remember when I was in 9th grade high school, and that's when I learned that, and this is for the context of the United States, there are 6 media companies that control 90% of what we read, see, and listen to. So that includes radio stations, that includes the newspapers, that includes TV shows, that includes newsrooms. And I know that in the context of the United States, and then in my travels to go to Kenya, and I was like learning from people from the UK and then learning from people in Kenya, and I was like, okay, what did you all watch when you were 3? And like just to learn from their culture, they're like, we watch Finding Nemo, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, like I had to learn how strong American ways and American culture and American media influence the entire world. And so I'm saying it to say, I think that social media brings another aspect of it being more personal, so I can promote what I want to personally promote on my page, right? But that access to information, that access to misinformation is so huge, and that pool is it's a dirty pool, right? It's a very dirty pool. And so we have to dig. And we have to find things and be very intentional on what we want to promote and what we want to do. Because in the context, especially in America, if you judge African Americans based on the media and what the movies say, it's completely different. And the same of your culture. You know, you all are the native people of America, of our land, you know, but the things that we know about y'all are not at all parallel to what is actually happening in your land. And so I think keeping close to the fact that fact of the control of our minds, the control of information is so strong that we have to begin to create new avenues of what that looks like. And so as a photographer, it is very, I'm just now getting into a space of making sure I document things and attach my own narrative to what I documented. Because immediately it can be a photo I take and somebody can run with it and say, oh, she means this with this photo. It's like, no, 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 no. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean something completely different. My narrative is this, and my narrative is to push liberation. My narrative is to push peace. And so I do think that artists have a very unique role, and the current filmmakers who just make films on their iPhones, right, have a very unique role in what information looks like, and how, especially because it connects visuals and words, right? We need both. We need to renew our minds of what it looks like and wash our minds of what true peace looks like.
Thank you, Dana. We have to end it here. Sorry, we are running out of time. So thank you, everybody. Our panelists, decision makers, the youth, the audience. Thank you also to UNESCO MGIEP for organizing this TAGe event. It's a unique platform where we can speak openly, youth and decision makers. So thank you very much. And I don't know if we can have the answers of about what we asked people. So the two feelings. If you have the answers. Okay, so we will display this. So thank you again. And okay, so we'll go for dinner, and then after that, there will be a concert. So thank you again, and we will be able to exchange during the dinner. Thank you. Fazola would like to